Dave Jack here, Superintendent of Fauquier County Public Schools, with another edition of One Hard Question. This week's hard question comes from Megan K. And Megan K. asks the following. I read in the newspaper that the school board is asking for $5 million more in funding. But at the end of every year, the school board is always has a large sum of money left over. A large sum like $1 million. That's a lot of money to have left over. Can't you do your calculations better so we know what you really need? Thanks, Megan. Good question. This is a question that's really come up in every school division I think I've ever worked in, because school divisions typically at the end of their fiscal years, they usually have money left over, and I'll explain that. $1 million is a lot of money. We actually carried over $1.3 million. In the context of a $128 million budget, that's a little over 1%. So the analogy I like to make is this: if your household budget is $5,000 a month, at the end of the month you'd have, if you had 1% remaining, you'd have $50 left over. So in the context of $128 million, 1.3 million in terms of dollars is a lot of money, but in terms of the overall budget, not so much. Why? Why is there money left over? Well, a couple reasons. One, school boards and superintendents get in a lot of trouble if they overspend their budgets. You do that, people get in a lot of trouble, start looking for new jobs. So what ultimately ends up happening is you go through the budget process and you're very careful in terms of how you estimate costs that require estimation, like fuel costs, the cost of contracted snow removal, the cost to heat buildings and cool buildings. Those are all costs that have to be estimated. So you want to estimate them as accurately as possible, but make sure that there's money there to pay those bills. So that's one part of the explanation. Another part of the explanation has to do with retirees. This last year, for example, we had a lot of retirees. We had a lot more retirees than we typically do. And folks who retire usually announce, towards the end of the school year and after the budget's already been approved. But when people retire, there's typically savings within the budget because folks who retire usually are at the top of the pay scale, and generally they're replaced by people who are teachers who are at the bottom of the pay scale. So this year had a lot of people retire. So there was savings captured there because they were, as I mentioned, replaced by people at the bottom of the scale. So what's the outcome there? Well, a big chunk of that $1.3 million was human resource savings in salaries. The carryover funding itself, of course, we carry over funding with the permission of the Board of Supervisors. And what we're required to do is submit how we intend to spend the money. And I wanted to share this with you because it's important. The $1.3 million and how we spent it. $326,000 was spent on a new student information system because the old one is obsolete. We needed to replace it. Buses, 4 new buses, $386,000, and that's just still trying to keep up with our bus replacement schedule, and we're not doing a very good job with that. We're still behind, even while adding 4 additional buses to what we already had in the budget. Technology, $48,000. That's mostly for equipment and licensing. Safety and security, $138,000. That's for camera upgrades, crisis response training. That's the active shooter training that we provided. Access control to some of our buildings, security bell and cameras for central complex, etc. And then we invested in some energy management equipment at a bunch of our schools at a cost of $422,000, but there's a savings there of $138,000 in energy costs as a result of that investment. So that investment will be paid back in about 3.5 years. And then we bought a new dishwasher for Mary Walter Elementary School for $35,000. So not having last year's budget sitting in front of me, I'm guessing that the majority of those things I just mentioned were things that were included as part of last year's budget proposal but didn't make the budget. So we were fortunate enough that the Board of Supervisors approved the expenditure of carryover funds on these things. So that was good for the school division. So anyway, I hope this answers your question, and Hope you have a great day. Keep the questions coming. Thanks very much.